further, I want to call out a special thanks to Jessica, and that's because she's totally qualified for the job. She has the degrees and everything. But anytime you get a new budget, you're handling a new audit, there's further quirks, things that you don't, know all the details to. And she has just dug in and pounded through those. She's also been a Gumby on that. The commissioners and our office and HR have had assumptions that have changed while we've gone through the budget. And she's been able to roll with those punches too. So anyway, thank you, Jessica, for that. First thing I'm going to call your attention to is the big sheet. This is the statutory sheet we have to print in the paper. We do it every year, at least in the 11 I've done this. The two left column groups are the two prior fiscal years. The third column group over is our current year. And then the far right column is the proposed year. Now, you were here for, deciding the agreements, the ingredients to put into the cake. The cake isn't baked right now. And that is what we're presenting before you and talking about. But I appreciate all of you that were here contributing to the conversations on what we should put into the cake that we're hopefully going to be adopting later on today. The bottom left-hand corner of that sheet calls out a couple interesting things. One is our regular property tax levy is $37,083,276. In addition to that statutory levy that we can take, we're taking $284,527, and that is a judgment levy. Vista's property was incorrectly assessed by the State Tax Commission, and so we had to actually pay out of our pocket that additional funds because of the State Tax Commission's error. That money is coming back in. It's not in the budget. It's replenishing our bank. It's not going into our budget. So that's a statutory issue that we have to do.
Clerk Rosedale.
Yes.
Is that like a nice plug to ask state reps, should the county have to make those adjustments when it's a state error?
There are going to be more coming down the pipe too. And I don't know if Mark's in on that kind of thing, but there are more coming down. We've got the railroad possibly. We have other utilities. But Vista was the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully it's not too much worse, but there will be more.
And I think part of the reason of inviting them is to see how those kinds of things impact the county, because our money doesn't change, but our obligation has to be met. And letting our elected officials that go to the state side know that how it impacts our budget is important to do. So
right.
Since he's taking notes back there, I'm just gonna plug that one in there.
That's right. And so our total budget is $78,048,046. With that, I'll hand it over to Jessica Stephanie, the comptroller. She's the one that was the cook in the kitchen on this thing, and she knows all the details. And I'll let her talk about all that.
So we'll just kind of go over like a brief overview. This is all in your handout. But the fiscal year 26 proposed budget reflects Bonner County's continued commitment to responsible fiscal management, workforce investment, and transparent allocation of taxpayer funds. This year's plan balances the need to maintain essential services, invest in our employees, address known operational priorities, and planning for long-term capital expenses, all while reducing cost in several departments. So the first thing that everyone should know is that for employee compensation, employees that have been in their position for 1 year or longer will receive a step increase.
Yep.
All positions will also receive a $1 per hour cost of living adjustment.
And
yes.
Can we say on that one, the reason we did it this is different, and it's the first time our county has done this. Instead of doing a percentage increase, we did a flat rate so that it was more equitable across the organization. You're seeing that change throughout a lot of different organizations where they're not saying a 3% adjustment. They're trying to make it so, because if you do a percentage, the people at the top get more than the people at the bottom. This way was more of a, it does come out to cost a little bit more, but it felt more fair and equitable across the organization.
And I think that yes, I think it was important to kind of look at, this was to help offset inflationary drivers, right? So everyone's cost for milk and eggs went up. It didn't go up by a percentage, right? So we can't do that every year because then we'll deal with some compression when it comes to our step and grade matrix. But I do think that every so often, it should be based on a flat rate.
And part of what you see different this go round is step and grade required submission of your performance evaluations. And so there's room for improvement on how we write those, but this was a change of an expectation that we're doing evaluations to justify the increases, not just the guaranteed, so we can address the staffing concerns of people feel like it doesn't matter the level of work, everybody's going to get the change. And so that was another change that happened this go around. So you'll see more training from HR on how to write better performance reviews and to track and help people meet expectations moving forward.
So this is a quick visual to see how many of the different funds actually are seeing reductions in the overall expenses. So I thought that this would be a great kind of visual for everyone to see where we were able to make some of those cuts. And then as a kind of brief overview by department, the clerk's office saw a pretty significant increase in their B budget, and that was primarily driven by the new budget book software, which we're hoping to have available to the public by the end of the year. And then we have some GASB required tracking for leases and subscriptions for our financial reporting, which will also be implemented in the next fiscal year. Facilities saw some growth due to expenditures for new buildings that they're now responsible for. Emergency management saw an increase, and that was primarily driven by anticipated vehicle repairs. We boosted the statutory reserve to the max allowable because we knew going into this that there were significant either projects and or other drivers where we would potentially need additional reserve funds. The airport increased, and that was primarily due to some of the major grants that they're expecting next year and the county match for those. Drug court saw a moderate rise, and that's due to projected case volume. The commissioners are looking at increasing the historical society allocation, and that was based on statutory obligations to preserve their current exhibits. Justice Fund saw some growth in the sheriff's office, justice services, and the prosecutor's office. Those details are listed in this handout. Planning are anticipating some declines in revenues and some moderate increases in expenses. Solid waste saw an increase tied to the bond repayment obligation. Tort fund, we have maybe some good news in that line. We were anticipating a much higher insurance premium cost. It looks like that we may see a reduction there. We're not. I don't think we're 100% finalized there, but it looks to be going in that direction. So that's good news.
We're just not changing it in the budget right now.
Correct.
We're going to do it after, but what we allocated was 1.285. And what our quote came in at the last hour was 692,414. So that's a big change. We're not leaving that excess in that budget. But that's where we're just not going to change it right now, but we're still going to, but that's what we got back from our last quote. So thank you to Christian for rushing we got it on Friday, so he rushed over our summary.
No groomers, veteran services, waterways all saw some small increases. The key decreases were in elections, and that's because we are no longer, we're going to only hold 2 elections annually based on legislation. So that's a significant savings. The treasurer's office also managed to find some significant savings in her contract negotiations for services, which is fantastic. Purchasing and commissioners both had small reductions to their discretionary budgets. Technology lowered their projected cost. Motor vehicles and engineering also saw slight decreases. Road and bridge. Their overall expenses were reduced, primarily driven by the fact that we don't know all of the federal funding that we may receive. There's a lot that was still in flux when we created the budget. So hopefully some of those funds come in and Road and Bridge can then open it up for some new projects, but that's that primary driver. District Court, the fair and 911 funds all saw reductions in their operational budget. The Health District, thank you, Asia, also lowered their request this year. And the assessors had notable decreases in expenses. There were a few very small kind of reallocations within the budget. Human Resources saw a small increase, and that was because we removed a portion of the employee recognition from the commissioner's budget. And it lives wholly in Human Resources now. And Weeds also saw a shift based on kind of going to a contract-based matrix rather than part-time employees. And so that's also in there. And in conclusion, this budget strategically invest in essential services and county employees while making targeted reductions in discretionary spending where at all possible. The result is a balanced approach that ensures Bonner County can meet the current needs, prepare for future obligations, and maintain fiscal sustainability. Mike, did you want to talk about?
Sure.
This over here?
So these are the traditional graphs that we show every year. We have the source of funds last or the current fiscal year, and then compared to next fiscal year, we've had some funds go up and some funds go down. You can just see the year-over-year comparison that way. The by fund budgets, this is sort of a reflection of the chart that you saw earlier, the plus and minus chart that Jessica called out. But this is in a scale bar form, not a percentage bar form. And you can see what's gone up and what's gone down. The light green is this current year and what's projected, and the dark blue is the proposed year. The one that is most interesting to people is the final one, the budget expenditures, where our money goes. And you can see by the pie chart there, where it all goes. The Justice Fund is a huge part of that. The General Fund is a big part of that. And Road and Bridge. Those are the three monster funds. Yep. Solid Waste is not a levied fund, but that's also a very large part of this. That's all. Back to you, Commissioner Williams.
Does the board have any comments?
Just for the clerk, if you wouldn't mind going back through the lower left-hand corner
Sure.
of the overall budget worksheet. If
Sure.
you could just quickly, please, again, talk through in a high level what each one of those line items are that lead to the total estimated revenue.
On the, yeah. Sure. We have the levies, of course, which are the tax on the property. We also have cash balance forward of 9.9 million, almost $10 million. That's money in our funds that we can push forward, that we basically not spent in prior levy years, that we can push forward to decrease our potential levy amount. We have grants, which are the matches and not the matches, but those are the money that we front for the different grants coming in and going out. The other is the one that's the most difficult sometimes to quantify, and those are driver's licenses, those are recording fees, planning fees, solid waste fees.
That's the anticipated revenue.
Yep. Yep.
Outside of the tax levies.
Concealed carry permit fees, that kind of thing.
So primarily fee-based revenue.
Right.
But then we
And
also
grants. And
we also have some grants. Like you said.
Yeah.
There's a difference, right, between anticipated revenue from grants versus cash flow revenue for grants, which is its own line item. So just to differentiate.
Right.
And so an example of the grants line item that you have here, is it correct to say, for example, we talked about a few of the recent business meetings where there would be, say, a grant coming in associated with the FAA for the airports. And in order to utilize that grant and take advantage of those funds, the county at times needs to be able to have cash on hand that we can use to make expenditures that we ultimately get reimbursed for. But we have to have that cash flow capability.
Correct.
So then based on all of those line items, that leads to the total budget for fiscal year 26 of $78,332,573.
Yes.
Thank you.
So kind of some highlights that I'm sure people want updates on is, one is our ambulance district. We do anticipate that we're going to take a TAN again. The overall budget cuts during our 2025 year have made it such that it looks like we'll end the year with about 800,000. That's a huge impact when you consider that we started this fiscal year essentially taking money from the county in order to make that number. So a lot of work and focus on budget and cuts and how do we maintain that service and essentially build that service the way it is supposed to be as a district, was done in a year's time. That was a huge overhaul. So thank you to the county clerk, the comptroller, to the chief for sitting down and working through hard times, and to the staff that stuck with the county as we went through this process. I want to say what I clearly hear from the ambulance district, having spoken with the staffing over there, is they are grateful to continue to be working for Bonner County. They want us to hear their issues and concerns as it relates to ensuring that they have the correct number of personnel, the services available to ensure coverage for our area. And then that ability to know that they can maintain and grow within inside Bonner County as the years come without feeling like we're not managing. And one of the ways that we are doing that transparently is by having our meetings that are telling you where are we at with our budget and giving that insight. This is one where I'll put a call out to our state representatives as we identify our ambulance service as critical, but there's no plan of what do you do with how it gets funded. And so those are questions that we have come to the state legislature to address. How do we address that particular issue? That it's going to require some collaboration between the counties and the state level of how we do that and maintain the viability of that. So again, I appreciate the presence of our state rep to hear the concerns from a county budget perspective. Statutory obligations, I wanted to give a comment on Historical Society, because one of the things that this board did was they came when Jessica mentioned the preservation. What we did was we heard that they needed the roof done, but we wanted to make sure that the money was used for the roof. So instead of just saying, here's the money you asked for, we earmarked the money for what was reasonable as our statutory obligation. We don't have obligations for everything that is the Historical Society, but that was one of them. And so when we gave the $40,000, it was $40,000 for the roof. So that's what we're trying to focus on, is not that we gave money in excess, but that we're making sure it meets the needs of your tax dollar obligation. That's a big shift because we did that a few different places in the county budget. You'll see that the fair requested additional personnel. We didn't hand them the money for the personnel, but we did hold back money to address that issue as it comes forward so that we can anticipate where we're going with things. And in part, trying to shift away from the mindset of it's in my budget, therefore I can spend it mentality, versus when you're given the funds for the roof, we expect the roof. And so we earmarked it that way. We did increase our contingency fund to its maximum, and part of that was to address the unknowns that we have had to open our contingency fund in this year. We have additional litigation that will follow us into the next fiscal year. One of those we have, I think, 3 pieces of litigation that are in the federal layer. Sometimes those can cost more. So we're trying to plan for what we see that could potentially impact our budget. So that doesn't mean we are going to spend everything that is in that contingency fund. This is a part of showing you that we recognize the risk. We're trying to plan for whether or not we need it so that there continues to be operation within the county without interruption. Personnel increase was a huge part of our budget change. It was really a 2% increase, which was not very high. But when you look at our cost of living and the change in rates of pay, we need people on the ground that are doing our jobs. And part of that we heard from our community of we needed to raise our rates. And that means we also have to be tighter in other areas of our budget. The future budget requests, I made the comment that the 3% doesn't allow us to cover what's in excess. So one of the things that I want to draw attention to is the things that you might hear in your next fiscal year. And so road and bridges first, because we're coming around winter time, and that's going to be the first probably comments we receive. Mag chloride is a big change for this county, as it is going to be for a lot of people. We have one service provider, that rate has gone up. Our director has done his due diligence to address this issue, but it is going to impact our cost and infrastructure. So I just want that to be on your radar when people are calling about the mag chloride question here. Technology personnel, they all fell asleep. AI is going to impact our county. We have to. Don't you have to do the funky chicken dance? So technology is going to have some increases to address the change in technology. Emergency personnel is a big piece, as well as litigation. I wanted to draw attention to some of the items that are in the sheriff budget request that we did not approve this go round, so that it's on our radar. Because part of what happens is when we're done with this budget, we need to start working on the next budget. And the next budget needs to address, if we are not going to be able to afford some of these things, what are we doing to move in that direction? You've heard me mention quite a bit about doing our capital reserves improvement so that we're actually moving in the direction instead of constantly telling you we need this. And so the sheriff's office has identified a need to replace our 911 dispatch center. His estimated cost is 3 to 4 million. There's additional storage for records that he has at 400, and then a jail replacement. We have to work on what are the needs to see where do we start addressing the concerns before they become an emergency that the county cannot afford. Continued personnel in terms of professional licenses is going to be an issue. And people that have technology is a big one, because as it changes, as soon as we hear about the change, they've already moved on to something else. And so being able to attract people to our area, as well as our road and bridge specialists, the skilled labor is going to be big for our county to continue to function. So kind of our next budget review, we are going to get new software in place that's going to allow for a better budget process. And one of the things that the clerk's office mentioned was there is an impact of our subscription in line with government finance office. We were supposed to be doing that and we weren't doing that. This is something that will help us catch things like that. So we're doing a request that our department show a percentage of their budget that is statutorily required, so that you can see where could we potentially cut our budget, because it's typically going to be in what's not required. Continued focus on county obligations, reduction and mitigation of leakage through things such as litigation. That's going to be a big one. You've watched every fiscal year we've started our county budget settling claims that could have potentially been avoided. And so I think that our board has done a very good job of taking a reduction in things like that. Increase director and elected involvement in the budget process to include expanded clerk presentation on the budget, so that we're allowing the people such as the electeds and directors to actually come before you and say, this is what I'm requesting. And maybe we look at the question and answer aspect of individual budgets. Insurance risk and claims have been my focus this year. As self-insured, there's much more that is needed than what we are actually doing. And so this go round, we're going to start doing more process and procedure that the departments can rely on, that the electeds can rely on, that allow us to see where we're leaking out our claims. For example, if we're leaking out a lot of claims on our windshields, which it seems like we do, it's how do we mitigate that? Are we making sure we're cycling through providers that might be able to partner with the county to look at what does it really mean to be self-insured? There is a difference. Self-insured does not mean you don't have insurance. It really is that we're absorbing a lot of the cost, but it requires us to be more in charge of our claims and our mitigation than we are. And part of that is addressing claims management software and how we communicate throughout our departments to reduce those risks. So the other one is my goal that we increase utilization of the legal services that Bonner County already pays for. And so whenever we are sending something out to a third-party attorney, that's a check that we have to write. And so are we actually doing that for cases that our prosecutor's office cannot manage? Because if that's not the case, what happens is we're not building up our institutional knowledge within our own county. We're relying on third party, which means that the cost wax and wanes and we can't depend on that cost. And so that's another thing to take a look at. One of the things that this board did prior to this budget review was we looked at the prosecutor's rates of pay. We looked at what needed to change to attract people to fill that office appropriately. And that should include, as we get that built up, that we start utilizing that office for more things, not just sending all of our employment claims out of the county to reduce some of the costs associated with that. And so with that, that is where we are with our budget. I think we did an exhausting, very good job for our first go round of doing more details on our budget. The clerk's office held a lot of meetings with the board, and a lot of you guys as directors came forward with your ideas. We're not done. We're just now getting started on what it looks like for our next budget. But thank you. One of the things I think our board should take credit for is the health district comment. We as a board did not agree with what they wanted us to pay. And we as a board went to the health district and cast the only dissenting vote. But the dissenting opinion actually led to Panhandle Health reviewing what they were asking for, and every county got a reduction in their budget associated with Panhandle. One of the things that we have to start addressing is what do we need versus what are we getting from Panhandle? And then the impacts in our infrastructure are huge impacts our healthcare. Mental health is an increasing one. And what money we send out that we're not getting a return on. I welcome any assistance from our state representatives on how we can positively impact the things that are outside of our control as a county, because we only get the 3%. There have been discussions on property tax of do we address it by saying an average, because equally members of our public feel like just jumping every year seems unreasonable since the market waxes and wanes. Should we take an average of that change? There's a lot to be had in a discussion between the state and the county and how those votes impact us. I think for our county, having gone through our ambulance district issue, the biggest one is going to be how do we fund emergency service in a growing population that needs that service with a tax base that actually doesn't shift, because the cost of healthcare goes up. And you're seeing the ambulance get used more and more without really a way for us to fund it. And it's a district. What's clear to Bonner County is our county budget cannot fund the ambulance district. It's its own taxing district. So we have to operate within that means. So with that, that's all I have for our budget review. Any recess? Yep. Any comments from the board? I'm gonna.
No, good. Well, I do want to highlight again that one of the things we spoke about quite a few times in the different budget meetings was looking ahead to say, when do certain pieces of equipment and costly items, when did the end of the reach the end of their useful life? When do they need to be replaced? What are the life cycle costs of these things that we need to take into account? And that's where we started either formally funding or at least the conversation around some of these different capital accounts. And I just think it's so important to continue as a county to look at future planning and future thinking, because this concept of you're not allowed to ask because you're just going to be told no means that we don't plan. And then it becomes an emergency expenditure in the year where it finally hits. And that is never the way to budget. That is never the way to do business. And so I think there's a lot of value in the conversations that we did promote and that we've started. And I just want to see that carry forward, because to me, again, those are the seeds that were planted for a viable future budget plan, so that we're not having to deal with as many emergencies, because emergencies should truly be things that were not expected. These items are things we can expect, we can plan for, they just weren't being done. And so I think that's a critical shift in our thinking as a county with how we do budgeting that we need to carry forward. So I just want to, again, promote the fact that we do that in as thoughtful a way as possible.
Commissioner Court?
No comment.
All right, so we're 6:30, right? That's
6.
All right,
The public hearing, you gotta open up for public comment, right?
do you want to give public comment?
Well, you have 5 people on Zoom, I think you have at least a member of the public. You advertise it as a public hearing.
Yeah.
Open up for public-
Did you?
We should.
Okay, so let's open it up for public comment. Anybody want to raise their hand? Let's see on Zoom. I'll stop the shit. Thank you, Director Bell. Nobody online, anybody in the room? Rep Souter, any comment from you? Thank you for coming.
No.
I'm not calling you out, kind of ish. All right, so it is 10:43 and this meeting is adjourned till 6 o'clock this evening.
Not adjourned.
Where I mean
Maybe
recess, sorry,
Recessed.
recess.